we've placed Queen Bee in her rightful place on the throne at Kensington Palace.
All right. Well, Claudia, thank you so much for joining us and talking all about Crown to Couture. This looks absolutely amazing. So how did this exhibition come about?
Oh, goodness. I mean, it sort of started in 2018. It was the second or the first Tuesday in May, the day after the Met Gala. And Polly, my co-curator, and I had been sort of watching the Met Gala the night before. And we just thought, God, there are so many similarities. You know, these images of celebrities being maneuvered out of their vehicles and their gowns being arranged around them by attendants. And we started to play with the idea. And I think for many years, we'd used celebrity culture as ways of helping explain certain aspects of 18th century court life to our visitors. And so we just sort of played with the idea. And the more we researched and discussed, the more the connections just sort of kept coming.
Yeah, definitely. And this is the largest exhibition at Kensington Palace. So I would imagine that it was a lot of work putting this together. So when did you start with and like you said, you kind of started planning this right after the Met Gala, but how long does something like this take to put together?
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, really, we tend to try and work to sort of between 2 and 3 years. Mm-hmm. So we started planning this in 2018. And then, of course, we all had a break because of the pandemic. So that sort of slowed things down. We would have launched that much sooner. But really, it's been sort of in the works since 2018. So a few years have gone into getting us to this point.
Definitely. So when people walk through this exhibition, what story are you hoping to tell with these, the designs that are on display and things like that?
Yeah. Well, really, it's all a way of giving our visitors a sort of recognizable and relatable route into our 18th century stories. So it's still very much a Kensington Palace story, but what we want to explain to visitors is how these spaces would have functioned and the types of people that would have populated them in the 18th century in the court of George II and Queen Caroline, but in a way that makes sense to us now. And so, these spaces were designed to be filled with the biggest names of the day, the most fashionable people of the day, and the most exquisite couture garments. And so it made sense to do that now with people like Blake Lively and Lizzo and Beyonce, because those are names that we can really understand. And it would have been their equivalent names in the 18th century that would have been in these spaces.
I love that so much. So like you were saying, like, was the Georgian era, was that like the seen to be seen era at Kensington Palace then?
Yeah, it really was. And I think it's particularly George II and Queen Caroline's reign. So from the 1720s, for a couple of decades, Kensington is the sort of, really the key entertaining space. The monarchy is becoming less and less politically powerful in the 18th century, but it's still the center of society. So, government still travels with the monarch as they move between the palaces. And similarly, all of fashionable society still revolves around the monarchs at that point. So Kensington would have hosted these elaborate receptions several times a week. And so it was a party palace, but it was also a space for sort of personal advancement, for political progress. It was a really high stakes environment. There was a lot to be won and lost by a successful appearance at court.
So they were throwing like Met Galas, like multiple times a week. Let's just
exactly, literally.
That's insane. So what pieces from celebrities, which ones were your favorite? Which ones were the hardest to secure? Kind of walk me through a little bit of what we're going to be seeing.
Well, it's so hard to pick favorites in this because there are so many incredible things. I think, one favorite has to be Beyonce's 2017 Grammys look. And we've placed Queen Bee in her rightful place on the throne at Kensington Palace, and that look was really special. I think in part because for me it's such a memorable and iconic look. But within that performance, she was channeling different African goddesses, including Ocean, the goddess of fertility, and also channeling the god Apollo, who is the sun god, who appears on the ceiling of the room that she's portrayed in, because the 18th century monarchs, like Beyonce in that performance, also sort of channeled the gods in their presentation. And it's a creation by Peter Dundas, and it's also just exquisite. So when you see it in person, it's even more special than it is in the images. And I think that's the case with quite a few of the outfits. There's another one, a real favorite, is Blake Lively's Met Gala look from 2022, which was designed by Versace in collaboration with Blake Lively. And in that she was referencing various aspects of New York's architecture. And it was spectacular on the red carpet, and you saw this wonderful copper bow be unfurled into this verdigris train, which was supposed to reference the patination of the Statue of Liberty. But I think what you didn't fully get in the pictures was that the train is then hand painted with all of the signs of the zodiac from the ceiling of Grand Central Station. And there are these details which are so beautiful when you see the objects in person, which you just don't get from the images. So that's been really special.
Sounds amazing. Were any of these very hard to secure, or what was the hardest to install as well?
Well, I mean, actually people have been so generous, and I think have been sort of enthused by the concept and by the thought of seeing contemporary couture in a historic space. There's been, people have been brilliant. Certainly the hardest object to install was Katy Perry's 2019 Met Gala look, which was the Moschino chandelier dress. And it is a full-size crystal chandelier, and we had to transport it from LA to London. It's incredibly fragile. It's also enormous. And if you think that our palaces, the doors were designed for huge mantua dresses to move through, but even the chandelier couldn't fit through some of these doors. So it took even once it was in London and at the palace, just the logistics of moving it through the spaces were really, really complicated. And then it's fully lit. So that was a really complicated object, but it owns the space, and it belongs in the space. It's sort of such a beautiful marriage, and it's such a wow moment when you see it. So it was completely worth the effort, and Moschino was so supportive in making that happen.
I love that so much. So when people walk through them, which piece do you feel like is going to get people talking the most?
Oh goodness. I mean, I think seeing Queen Bee on the throne is just, it's such a wow moment, and it's such a, I think it's a really poignant moment to see her there as well. We also have a really wow moment in the blondes look for Billy Porter's 2019 Met Gala arrival, and he was carried in by 6 sort of shirtless, gold-clad men on a litter, and he then unfurled these incredible gold sequined wings, and it was the most insane piece of performance on the red carpet. It just totally, I think, transformed what the red carpet is and what it can be. And making it a real space for performance in its own right, and not just for sort of glamorous appearance, but really for performance, which again is sort of exactly what was happening in the 18th century court. But that is placed next to Queen Charlotte's sedan chair from the end of the 18th century, which is this exquisite piece of craftsmanship that's beautifully detailed. And so they're such a kind of, they make so much sense when you see them next to each other, and that's a really impactful moment.
I love that so much. So as people walk through this exhibition, you're going to be seeing, like you said, the modern day pieces mixed in with the 18th century pieces. So you can see how it almost a cohesive look type of that it could have just flowed together.
Yeah, it's the comparison is made throughout the exhibition. So, so the contemporary the pieces we chose of contemporary dress were very much sort of guided by the historic story of the spaces, of the garments, of the way in which clothing operated and functioned at court. So those comparisons are made consistently throughout the exhibition.
For more news, content, and exclusive interviews, make sure to hit the sub, like, and bell button down below and visit usmagazine.com.